Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles Stories of the Supernatural. And I hope you enjoy this new show, whether you're viewing it on the internet or listening to a podcast version of the episode. I do want to thank you for being part of my audience. You can also find links to videos or podcasts on MiamiGhostChronicles.com, as well as where you can submit your story about any eerie experiences you've had, which I would love to hear about. Just go to the Submit Your Story tab. Please subscribe to our channel so that you receive notification of when we release a new show. And find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This is where I usually live stream and where I give you a behind-the-scenes look at locations where new episodes are being filmed at. I also tell you about all the interesting guests that will be appearing soon on Stories of the Supernatural. I hope you enjoy the show, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles Stories of the Supernatural. How is everybody doing today? Good, I hope. Today here, it's still high summer, even though it's September in the country, but you know, and I see that up there in northern states it's getting chilly, and here it's just the same as before. High summer in Florida. But anyway, guys, I want to tell you a little bit about the guest that I have today. And I'm super excited because this person not only is experienced in the field of the paranormal, but does research. And his name is John Griffin II. Now, he's lived through a haunting since nursery school. And you know, guys, why I bring this up, because that's always one of my questions about my guests is like, when was your first encounter? And even though it's a positive one, I mean, from there we're gonna ask him more about that. But absolutely, yeah, he did have that experience since he was just only 4 years old. Then he went on, and he now works as part of the Uini Research, which is a paranormal organization out of New York State. Now, it is focused on the truth regardless of what the truth is and how uncomfortable the truth may be. And you know why that's important to me and why that's one of my hot points as far as when it comes to anything having to do with paranormal research. Now, they've developed theories such as the thunderstorm effect, the demonic frequency, color frequency effect, the rainbow effect, and many others. Of course, we're going to ask John about that. And they're still researching topics such as Nibiru, spiritual activity, intuitive abilities, self-proclaimed messiahs, the Torah codes, numerology, ancient text, ufology, and much more. Each of those in a show in and of themselves, but we're still going to ask him about that. And it sounds, you know, they understand a lot that the research is controversial, but it is necessary. But one of the most important things that they remain neutral. Okay, in other words, they don't jump the gun and say something is real or fact-based until it is based on facts. And I like this. They go by one saying, facts don't care about your feelings or your beliefs, which is absolutely very accurate in the truth. So let me welcome to the show. How are you doing today, John?
Not too bad. Thank you for having me on.
No, absolutely. It is my pleasure. And like I said in your bio, we got a little bit of a look-see, and we see that, yes, that one of the questions which I ask all my guests was when they had their first paranormal encounter, even if at that time they didn't realize what it was, especially when you're a child. But what was it that happened to you on that first encounter when you were 4?
Well, I'll be honest. I was one of the brats in nursery school.
Okay.
Constantly bullied people and everything, and it's basically, when I was in nursery school, you know, we kept on, I went to a religious school, and they kept on trying to get me to go to the little Bible session, but of course, naturally, I wanted to play with the toys.
Yes.
But since I wouldn't listen to them, they would put me on, the punishment, which was the thinking chair.
Uh-huh. That sounds like wasn't that effective for you after a while, right?
Not really, considering it was like every day, and my mother would show up and go, "Okay, what did he do?" But that actually leads into that first experience. I looked outside. Well, it was the playroom at the time before my brother was born.
Okay.
And I looked outside and I saw what appeared to be, well, it just looked like a light with wings.
Okay.
And I'm like, I felt so calm. And then I just remember there was like a flash as if it just came like right towards me. I wasn't freaked out by it at all. It was very comforting, but I felt so different after that.
Okay.
I went back to nursery school, and it was like I was a completely different person. I didn't really bully anybody anymore. I was rarely ever punished. In fact, I became fearful of being punished.
Really? Wow.
So, yeah, it was like complete night and day. And back then, I mean, I didn't gravitate towards adults or kids.
Right.
But once I hit kindergarten, I would actually hang out with the teachers. Sometimes maybe I went and played kickball or dodgeball, but I would want to go and say hi to the teachers, and I would stand next to them while they're talking to each other. It's a completely different person. And I mean,
let me ask you, the adults around you, like your parents or your teacher, did they ever ask you? Because I imagine maybe they thought you were sick or not feeling well when they saw this behavior change in you?
No, they just welcomed it.
Okay. Just like, let's leave that alone. Okay, that's good. Anyway, go ahead, continue.
I mean, I've had some thoughts on it, but it's not like I had any dreams or anything like that after that. It was just like that happened, but then that's when it led into the actual I mean, that was like the only time that happened, and then there was the haunting itself.
Okay.
That's when I started to experience other things that weren't so pleasant.
And was this in the same house that you saw what you saw outside the window?
Yes. I had lived in that house for approximately 19 years.
Okay.
And it just has pretty much progressed throughout my life, and to the point that even my brother ended up dealing with it himself.
Okay. Okay, and that was going to be one of my next questions, because I know sometimes either the whole family shares in it or there's a target person. And that's what I was going to ask you. Were you the target person, or did any other family members or siblings also have their own experiences?
Well, later on I found out that my brother was being tormented by the same one that I was dealing with when we came across one specific male entity, who I just referred to as the disappearing person. I mean, I didn't know about the term ghosts or anything of that sort at the time. My brother actually took over. My parents put the bedroom, or his bedroom, where the playroom was. His bedroom was across from the basement door. Now, I had a serious fear of the hallway, because that's where I kept on seeing that guy.
Okay.
But my brother, when he finally was able to talk, he talk and walk. He got up and he would, I would wake up and he would be next to me in bed.
Wow.
There was points where he talked about his door, because he had a sliding door for his room.
Okay.
His door would slide completely open. He told me that he saw a guy.
Wow.
And he didn't really give me much of a description until he got older. But it seemed like it was myself and my brother who were the main targets. My mother did experience some things, but she didn't want to frighten us, so she didn't tell us until we were in our teens.
Sure.
And my father, whether he experienced anything or not, he just refused to even acknowledge the haunting.
Okay. Yeah. I've heard of that. For some reason, especially the fathers, they if they ever fess up, they kind of like, it's like if I say it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. Let me ask, and so what do you think was the point of origin? The basement, and then leading up out of that basement? Do you think that's where it was originating out of?
That was one of the main areas for him specifically.
Right.
Yeah, it was he seemed to come from the basement, but he did travel throughout the house, no matter where we went, because originally we originally got bunk beds.
Okay.
Because Jeremy used to use his room anymore.
Okay.
And then eventually I got to the point that he kept on coming in our room.
Right.
So I would go sleep on the couch near my parents' room. Then, well, because I left Jeremy followed suit. So pretty much for about 7 years, Jeremy and I substituted our nice comfy beds for couches.
Which that right there speaks volumes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But the thing that bothered me most was when he walked into the living room. I thought it was my dad just coming in, getting ready for work.
Right.
Because it sounded like his shoes, like how he typically walks.
So you were even hearing, it wasn't only seeing him, you were actually having auditory where you were hearing him walk, in other words.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well, the scariest part, which most people haven't heard about, is there were times, most of the time I didn't see him. The door, I would usually leave a nightlight or one of my lamps, my touch lamp, on slightly.
Okay.
And I would have my door cracked open because there were times that he was in the room.
Okay.
But the worst part was when you would hear him outside, and the kitchen's pitch black at this point, so I'm looking at nothing out there pretty much.
Okay.
And you just hear heavy breathing as if somebody's standing by the doorway.
God, that's horrible.
And it's just like, okay, well, I know he's there, and I leave the door open in case I have to run out, but he's there.
Right.
So if I open the door, am I going to see him? You know, am I going to run straight into him? What's going to happen to me? I mean, I didn't understand what was going on.
Sure.
But basically when we ended up in the living room, he ended up walking into the room.
Okay.
And he stopped and he turns and he looks at me, and then he walks towards my brother, and I'm just like, when I woke up the next morning, it was just, I finally was just like, there's no escaping this guy.
Right.
Like, is this going to be my life?
Okay. Yeah. In other words, wherever you went, he was eventually going to follow. Like you said, here you guys are gravitating as close to your parents' room as you can. It's like, okay. And yeah. And did you ever, as far as the description, did it look like, because I know you hear sometimes of people, it's not a shadow man, but it's like the dark outline. You really can't make out features or clothing or time period. Was he, or could you see more about what he looked like?
Jeremy and I both got a very good visual of him.
Okay.
The time that he walked into the living room, he was wearing khaki pants,
wow.
Blue shirt, more of a blue dress shirt.
Mm-hmm.
He looked younger, I'd say more middle-aged, probably 30s, 40s.
Okay.
And he had darker hair, very short, Caucasian male, thinner build. He was pretty well dressed, but he had a very stern face to him. My brother,
wow.
He saw him next to a Christmas tree, and this is the part that always confuses me, is he said that he woke up and he saw him standing there pointing a gun at him, and he was in a hunter outfit with red eyes.
Oh, crap.
But the rest of the description of him matched exactly what I had, just different clothing.
Right.
So that's when we referred to him, we nicknamed him the Hunter. That actually came from the experience that Jeremy had.
Okay. Based on that. So, but it sounds like a modern guy. When I mean modern, it doesn't sound like, and I don't know how old that property was or anything, but it sounds like a more modern or recent person that lived there, or you never found out?
I know Jeremy has started doing research on the house.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure exactly what he's found yet. I know he's been looking into it. I know when we were kids that the house was approximately 70, 80-ish years old, around there.
Okay. So yeah, that sounds, there's a lot of years of things that could have happened there before your parents bought it. So, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and then what happened? It stopped with what, when you moved out, or did it ever just stop on its own?
It was kind of as I got older, it seemed like the activity dissipated, but it didn't really.
Okay.
That it was more of hearing rather than seeing.
Okay.
But I still dealt with. I mean, there were still other entities that were in that house that seemed to kind of connect. And it made us question when we. I mean, within the past few years, Jeremy and I have really sat down and just analyzed everything that happened to us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I found out more about his end of it. He found out more about mine, not realizing that we had experienced far more.
Right, and you compared notes, and you said, wow. If we're hallucinating, man, we're hallucinating the exact same thing. So
exactly.
And you said, and your mom got some of it, but not all of it. It sounds like you two, as children, were the ones that were more on the receiving end of whatever his problem was, whether he had lived there. Because sometimes you think, okay, was this somebody that lived there for some reason, was attached there, or was it because you two, as young kids, children, were more sensitive, had psychic abilities in order to see him, and that's why he kept appearing to you guys? What do you think that was? Do you think he's attached to that property, or was it just you guys?
I don't know about that part. I do know this is just going off of the pattern that we saw. Okay. Considering that he focused on Jeremy and I, there were actually two spirit entities. Okay. Entities in there, and there was a little girl.
Okay.
Who we only dealt with once. She was down the hall, calling out, saying, "Help me, help me." Oh. It was down the hall where he normally shows up. Okay. In the past, when I've gone down the hall, the guy would appear and he would just tell me to go back. The worst part is that's where our bathroom was.
Oh, right. It's like this little kid hopping on one foot, like, I got to go to the bathroom, but how bad?
Yeah. And the other one was up in the attic, who we nicknamed Jonathan. And there were times when I was a kid, it was like I had that conversation, that little best friend thing. Mm-hmm. And he told me that because he stays in the back of the attic. Okay. And he told me that he's hiding from the bad man. Oh. So I'm like, wait a minute. So we have a girl saying, and this is now the past few years that Jeremy and I have discussed it, we have a little girl saying, "Help me." We have a boy who's hiding from the quote-unquote bad man, and then we have a man who's constantly focusing on Jeremy and I.
Okay, yeah.
Like this person seems to have a problem with kids.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe he had a problem even as a live person, in other words. So yeah. God knows what, without knowing specifics, what he was up to when he was alive. So, and there's two children. Are there any other adult spirits that you've come across or that you came across?
Nope. It was him, the two children. There was actually one point where we came across the ghost of our dog Robbie. Really? And wow. And then we also had the worst part came later, which was a demon.
Oh, how did you get there? I mean, this guy sounds bad enough, and I know, but how? I mean, what happened?
Well, I mean, I started. I basically my brother and I, especially me. I mean, I can't really speak fully for him, but I know he had dealt with so much, and people, of course, they make their comments, so he kind of kept to himself with the haunting. But for me, I'm very vocal about it, and I've had gone to religious schools this entire time, being told that ghosts don't exist, and then psychiatrists and all that type of stuff. And it came to the point that I'm like, wow, no one believes me. I lost all my friends. Okay. Went into a depression at a very early age. Okay. And I just kept on falling and falling and falling. All right. And then all of a sudden, I started noticing a smaller figure. And I'm kind of like, okay. At first I thought it might have been a kid, but then there was this one time we played hide and seek. And I went into the closet. We had a closet, a huge walk-in closet down in the basement. Wow. And I went into because they had like rows and rows of clothes, so I went and I hid within the clothes. And this was at a time where actually some of the neighborhood kids we actually had just met, and they were younger, and for whatever reason, they just seemed to like me a lot. So, they would come over all the time. So Jeremy and I would, play games with them and such. I was hiding, and then all of a sudden, one of the pieces of clothing just swings a bit.
Okay.
And I turn and look, and not even, just only a few feet away from me was another face. And it was nothing I had ever seen before. It was, it was the eyes that got me. It was like you were staring into nothing.
Oh,
and
God.
I darted out of there. Spoiler alert, I lost the hide and seek game, but...
No, I was like, who cares? At that point, it's like... That is... It's the basement. You said it was a closet in the basement, right?
Yes.
I don't know what it is about basements. So you're like...
Oh, we've researched that heavily.
Okay. It's like, basements and cellars and stuff like that. They get their creep factor way up there. I mean, as far as especially the type of things that are seen there. But so I imagine you got out of there like. So this was because you. Let me ask you something. Was it height wise, like your same height, or was it down further? What was it when you saw that face?
When I finally got to see it better, I mean, at that point it was just the face.
Okay.
So it was approximately just maybe over 3 feet,
right.
Around 4 feet, around somewhere in the middle.
That's what I was getting at. Okay, yeah. So we're talking something really, really short. Okay, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. But I did finally get to get a look at it because it did make its appearance at one point, but it did something unusual rather than walk. My door to my bedroom opened, and I heard something crawling.
Oh, my God.
So now this is when I was finally getting back into my room.
Okay. I was about to say that. Okay. So how old were you now when this happened?
I was heading into my teens.
Okay. So you're a little bit older. Okay. So you heard something crawling. God.
And then I looked up. And, because, I mean, we did have cats. We did have cats and dogs. The dogs usually slept in my parents' room. Mm-hmm. But my cats, they would still usually come in. And I still kept the door open just in case.
Right.
But this time I heard something. I heard the door creak. And then and I was never a heavy sleeper. I could never sleep because of this stuff.
Exactly.
I rolled over, and I'm like, I don't see anything. I rolled towards the edge of my bed, and there's this thing on, like, its hands is humanoid. And it had more of like an animalish type legs, but it was like the best way to describe it. And this scene from this movie, it bothered me because it reminded me of it. It was one of those. Not the actual Conjuring movie, but it was one of the histories that they did. There was this one scene where you have they're looking down the stairwell, and there's something looking back up at them. Okay,
I understand what you're saying.
It was that. Yeah, it was basically picture that, only smaller, and on the floor.
Because here you're thinking you're going to see more probably a cat. That's what you're thinking. I'm going to see a cat. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Besides, what did you yell out of scream? I mean, what did you? I would have been like, "What happened? What did you do?" I mean, that's a horrible thing.
I froze.
Yeah.
I had never seen anything like that. I recognized the face, but I froze, and then I kind of just blanked out, which presumably, I'm presuming that I probably passed out at that point because I just remember waking up.
Okay.
When I woke up, my door was still open.
Okay.
So it was like, okay, I saw this person when excuse me, not person.
You're right, whatever it was.
And then now I'm seeing this thing, and then I wake up and my door is still open. Like,
oh my God.
Like, and it got worse from there because it was, at that point, it was actually following me. There were dreams that went along with it. It was nightmare after nightmare. And it got to the point that I became very antisocial.
I bet.
And I just, I came to the point because it was like there was no one to turn to. Mm-hmm. At the time, my parents, I thought, didn't believe me. My brother was more closed. I mean, he's not the most social person.
Right.
I mean, he's a lot different now. I mean, like, we've both opened up to each other. But I mean, I pretty much secluded myself to my room. It would basically.
Did he ever see that thing that you just described, or were you the only one?
I've brought it up to my brother. I don't know if he's actually seen it.
Okay.
He hasn't disclosed that to me yet, if he has, but
okay.
He was mainly the hunter is the one that went after him.
So let me ask you: did this thing and the hunter, did they take turns, or did you see a spike where you would see them both around the same time, and then it would die down, or would they just take, hey, it's my turn today? How is that?
That's the interesting part. When this demon showed up,
right?
I didn't see the hunter or the kids anymore.
Really? That is interesting. That is very interesting. Because
now, I know my brother had still experienced stuff, but he was experiencing, it seemed like things may have died down for him too, but
mm-hmm.
it was more of a rare, if anything happened, it was more of a rare occasion, but we didn't really see them.
Okay. But that's unusual, where all of a sudden one thing, and obviously it became worse, I imagine, because one thing is to see a human figure, even if it's a ghost, but it's human, but when you start seeing something like that, God, where do you go with that?
Well, and that's where the thought process were coming in, because it was just like, is this me thinking? Because there was a point, and it was in my, I think, it was in my book too. I don't know if I put it on the website. I don't remember if I did. But there was one point where I was walking with some people, and something was telling me, walk out into the road. So I almost did, and I almost walked out into an oncoming car.
Really?
I pulled myself back, but this was when I was in serious depression too.
Right.
But then it was just like, I stopped, and I'm like, what was I thinking?
Right.
Like, that's not me. And then
exactly.
I turned, and I saw that specific thing standing by a tree, looking back at me.
Outside of the house. Oh.
This actually wasn't at the house. This was
right. This was.
It was at a completely, like a location about 20 minutes away.
Oh, that's not good, because that's like, okay, there's no place to go, because even if I leave the property, this thing is still affecting me. Wow, John, that is. Let me ask you: thinking back now, obviously hindsight's 20/20. Was something happening in your life or in your family when that changed, when this thing came on the scene?
Just mainly for me.
Okay.
It was basically that period where it was basically nobody to turn to. I was giving up on school. My depression was extremely bad. The anxiety just picked up, and I was just like...
Okay, I see. I understand now. Okay. So in other words, you were already feeling down prior to this, and then this comes along and aggravated everything that you were feeling. Because
exactly, and it's like, you know how you have those dreams about, you know, you have a family member that passes, and then they just appear in your dream, and they're like,
yes.
hey, I'm okay.
Yes.
This one was more on the lines of, this thing appears in my dreams, but it reminds me of my past about like being a failure, and I'm just like,
okay.
It was tearing at me even in my own dreams.
Right. So in other words, he was using, you know, what all human beings have, which are fears, insecurities. You know, that's the human condition. So, but in other words, he was trying to manipulate you by going into your dream state, it sounds like, and bringing him up. Like, okay, let's not forget about these things. Sure. Yeah, that's understandable. So, and what happened
then? And that's
then?
the thing is, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, basically, there were only two things that kept me going.
Okay.
And that was, funny part number one, but I love it, was my Nintendo games. And the other one was at an early age,
okay.
even before my teens, I started reading and watching shows about the paranormal.
Okay. And
I started researching, and I started keeping some notes here and there as I went into my teens.
Okay.
And it was like I was growing up quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, once I got into my later teens, and I was still dealing with this, I finally learned more about blessings.
Okay.
And I also I had also been researching this for years now, and it just became my passion. It was just, that's all I ever did was paranormal, and that's all I would ever talk about.
Okay.
And I actually tried a blessing.
Okay.
And I mean, I had a lot of spiritual faith, like, you know, you learn, you see the one thing that could have been an angel when
right.
I was a kid, and then you see the demon, and then you're like, after all these years in school, there was like, maybe there's some truth to this.
Right.
So
exactly.
That's when I went at it. Things got worse before they got better.
Okay.
That was, but finally, it left.
Oh, it did.
Or it seemed like it left.
Okay.
And we moved out of the house finally. We moved into a new house in Scotia. I think it was probably about 19 at that point.
Okay.
And it was like we started new house.
Okay.
We didn't experience anything for a while. It was, but my passion still kept on going. I mean, we got the internet and everything, and I was just like, this is great.
Right. No, well, it sounds like you went through so many years that I don't blame you for like trying to grapple with it the best way you could, which is really research exactly what you were doing.
And there was another thing that was kind of motivating me is like when you're secluded and you finally get the internet and you've been treated. The thing is that I also secluded myself when I went to school. Okay. I would stand back, and since I became more socially awkward,
mm-hmm.
I started watching and trying to understand how people interact.
Okay.
And I even went to some acting classes, because I was like, well, right now I'm very monotone and I have no expression. I'm like dead on the inside. Maybe if I could try to act, people, and they could teach me how to act normal. Okay. Or, quote unquote, maybe I could fit in somewhere.
Okay.
And acting school, I mean, it went to the whole like Romeo Juliet type stuff. Okay, people don't act like this out in society, so.
Yeah, all right. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking of more modern stuff instead of the Renaissance. Thanks. So, but still, you know what? That speaks volumes that you were willing to go that length to try to like, okay. Yeah, because that's what they say. If you pretend hard enough, after a while, you're not pretending anymore. So what are you saying, that the acting classes, drama didn't give you what you were looking for, or what?
Well,
no, it sounds like
no comment. No, actually, it didn't. No. Nope.
Okay.
I knew what not to do because it would be like, I was like, I don't see anybody doing this except on stage. So,
Right.
but I think what gave me more of the insight was the finally having access to the internet, seeing some videos,
Okay.
and watching people, and then watching some of the TV like news and such, and realizing, and I loved sitting down, not being a part of the debate, but listening to people who had even different beliefs, and watching them argue, and just like, it's kind of like, why are you guys arguing and saying that you're right and you're right? And
Right.
I don't understand the point of this. Why don't we find out what the one truth is?
Exactly. Well, yeah.
But then people were closed off to that. It was like,
Yeah, everybody.
well, no, this is my belief, and that's what it is.
Right.
Like,
And well, you know what? That's usually sometimes people that are into absolutes and like this is the way it is, and they don't leave the door open for either a change of, if not all of their beliefs, some of their beliefs, or willing to accept, hey, there's maybe somebody's come across something I haven't so far. Yeah, I know what you're saying, that they close themselves off to anything than what they know at that point, and that's it. And is this what got you interested in the research portion, as far as, beyond reading books? I know you were researching, you were going on the internet, and is this what prompted you then to start doing things on your own as far as the research was concerned?
Partially, it was when my there were a few different factors in that, and some of it came from school.
Okay.
Where basically I was in one of the religious class, and they I did bring up ghosts.
Okay.
I don't hesitate, and they were like, why do you do that stuff? And at this point, when I was 16, that's when I started my first team.
Okay.
And they were like, well, I brought up saying, well, this could also prove the existence of a higher power.
Exactly.
And they're like, well, there is no proof. You have to have faith. I'm like,
right.
Okay. And they told me that ghosts don't exist. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. And then the same class, and I'm surprised I did not get kicked out of this class for this, because I don't normally do this stuff, but this time I was so annoyed. They were like, look at all around the trees and how everything works, and I forgot what the exact wording was, but basically saying, how could there not be a God? I mean, look at all the proof. And I just my hand just shot right up, and I was like, didn't you just tell me that there is no proof and you have to have faith?
Yeah,
I mean, I was just like,
I'm sure they didn't want to hear that.
I was like, it was a little double standard right there.
Course.
Like I said, I'm surprised I didn't get kicked out, but it was just like, it was a valid question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But at that point, it was kind of like proving a point.
Yes, exactly. Like you wanted to, like, okay, if I'm going to use your own answer against you.
Yeah. And it happened to my brother too, because they just went at my brother the same way they went at me.
Okay.
So, and my brother, obviously, he did not take too kindly to it.
Okay. It's really difficult when you've had first-hand experiences like you guys had to be told that doesn't exist. When it's like, I know something, I don't know exactly what it was, but yeah, that's like you're trying to tell me to discount what my own eyes or my own ears showed to me more than once. Yeah, I understand why you guys would get really frustrated.
Well, and the other part of the portion where I went into the research was basically because I just remember watching everybody, like a bunch of the children, my classmates, all smiling and like having going to parties, what are you doing tonight? And then it's just like, oh, some people would actually say, would you ever hang out with Griffin? And they would purposely just say, no, he's weird. And they, make comments right in front of me. And it's just like, there were some people, I got annoyed with that, but there were other people that you would see them leave together.
Right.
But it was always me walking out by myself.
Okay.
And I'm just like, no kid, no child should ever have to go through what I went through.
Sure.
And the only way to get it to that point that that does not happen or happens less frequently is to find out what that one central truth is, because we're all disagreeing about beliefs, but the facts are going to lead to one answer. So why are we so resistant to it? And that became my main drive when I got into that mindset.
Right.
I was just like, you know what? I have this belief. I grew up in this religion. I grew up with these experiences that contradict this and contradict that and then this. And it's just like, you know what? I have to change myself. And because there were times that people would tell me, you know, and my belief would come out and I would be like, well, that's not possible. But here I am telling somebody that it's not possible, doing the same thing that somebody did to me.
Exactly.
So there's that one saying that, people want to change the world, but they're not willing to change themselves.
Of course not. And that usually when people are that rigid, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing because a rigid person means rigid beliefs. And like I said, yeah, if everybody has beliefs of some type of what they believe, basically because they believe it or because based on their own experience, but usually you always leave room for flexibility to change. I mean, we evolve. And our belief system is evolve. But I understand as far as, I think the problem is when people have a set of belief systems and then they want to exclude or isolate others that don't share them. And it's like, okay, so why can't we just have different belief systems or overlapping ones? But like you said, where it sounds like you were kind of excluded because you had voiced beliefs or things that everybody's like, no. And that's a problem right there. That's a big problem. You know, and unfortunately, you're well, you know what? I hate to say it. A lot of the major discoveries I think that have ever been done, especially in the field of science and otherwise, have usually been when a set of researchers have passed away because they kind of want to hold the field that what they've discovered or put forward as theories are the only valid ones, and anybody that comes along afterwards, they're wrong, and so they kind of have to like die before new things, are accepted, and it's like a macrocosm of what you're describing. And even in the field of the paranormal, that holds true.
Well, and there's actually one saying that that I would use because everybody would tell me that this can't happen, that can't happen, you'll never be able to do this, that, and the other.
Right.
And every time I would come back and prove them wrong. I love that part. But the one thing that I would always tell people is when they would tell me, you won't be able to do this, I turn to them and I go, watch me fly.
Okay.
And
exactly.
I finally explained it to people that it was like everybody would talk about the Wright brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And, that this can't be done, that can't be done, flying, oh my goodness.
Right, yeah.
But they didn't listen to anybody. They could have chosen, you know what, yeah, their belief is correct, where this can't be possible, and then they go and do it, and now we're doing it every day.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where that whole that's the whole saying that I turn to people about and just say, watch me fly. It's basically like everybody mocks somebody during history, and then it's usually one person or a small group of people that deliver the big change.
Sure, but it's an uphill battle though, because especially if it diverges a lot from the accepted belief, whatever theory, whatever's in place. The ones that came up with that one don't want to lose their king of the hill status. Like, yeah, we came up with this, and everybody accepts it as the end all be all. They don't want to lose that position and say, you know what, maybe we're wrong, or no, yours sounds more accurate than what we had proposed. Whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of ego and stuff like that. And, that's when you
yeah,
put on. So anyway, go ahead.
And I love it when people approach me about the science portion. Is like they'll tell me, well, scientifically this, and I was like, did you scientifically verify that? Because a scientist prior to that person proved another scientist wrong, who proved another scientist wrong, who proved another scientist wrong, and all these people are PhD.
There you go.
So to me, it's like.
Let me ask you, and I noticed that you have on there that you've developed several theories, such as the thunderstorm effect, demonic frequency. What are those? What are those theories? What are they?
Well, and some of those are going to be renamed because they're kind of evolving. Like some of them are more kind of separate,
sure.
but like the thunderstorm effect is more out of date.
Okay.
But it's well, the name's out of date. It's more evolving right now.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, one of the goals that I had, especially when I formed Uini Research,
right.
Was to rather than just always investigating a claim of a haunting. I mean, the way I look at it is we've documented for thousands of years, whether it be ancient text, stories, video, audio, you name it.
Okay.
There's obviously a lot of documentation supporting that there is unexplained activity, but then there's no explanation to go with the unexplained activity. It's so in my rule of thumb is, how am I going to educate anybody on something that's labeled as unexplained? You can't.
Right.
It's you can provide, like, and a photograph and a video and audio. Great, that's supporting documentation of unexplained activity. But my question always is, what are you getting from every single piece of those?
Exactly.
Great, you caught a photograph of an apparition. What does that photograph tell you? What does it speak to you?
Exactly.
To give you an example, and this was part of the development of the thunderstorm effect.
Okay.
I started gathering, and this was thanks to doing work like going into criminal justice and doing security work.
Okay.
We focused on statistics.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say numbers tell a story.
Okay.
As boring as numbers may be.
No, absolutely, they're facts.
And I started seeing patterns.
Okay.
And when I saw those patterns, it was like, okay, specific activity during like this time under these conditions at this location, and I really broke it down to the point of like even to where they were standing next to.
Really? Okay.
Like if they were standing next to a sink, what did that tell me?
Okay.
We caught a picture at Lizzie Borden's bed and breakfast of an apparition down in the basement.
Okay.
One thing that caught my attention, and it was basically his. We noticed that one pupil formed completely.
Okay.
We noticed his beard, his hair, his nose. But one of his eyes didn't fully form. We noticed that his right shoulder formed, but his left one didn't.
Okay.
So we were like, okay, well, so I would go back down there after getting the picture, and I went over to the area, and I saw a pipe with running water.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, okay, so I started documenting that. And then I started looking at, I was like, wait a minute. Okay, let me start looking at all these other, like potential apparition pictures and where we're catching this, that, and the other. And it started to form the pattern. So I started asking the question, well, wait a minute. We talk about full moons.
Right.
Increasing activity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I started researching, well, what does a full moon do? What does it affect?
Okay. Exactly.
And I know there's gravitational pull, but it keeps on touching on water, like the tide.
Exactly.
You hear about these stories about apparitions being observed walking along the water, or, like a lake.
Exactly.
You hear them constantly in the basement.
Yeah, exactly.
You hear about them in the bathroom or coming out of the bathroom.
Yes.
Then or even the kitchen. Oh, the cabinets are opening, and
Yes.
the refrigerator door is opening, and it's like, wait a minute. All of these areas, it's not electromagnetics that I'm looking at. I'm looking at humidity.
Right.
So that's when it was like some of the apparitions that I took a picture. I started comparing an apparition to a cloud.
Okay.
Well, when you get pictures of them, a bunch of times they appear more foggy.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, well, you can't hold a ghost in your hand, and you can't hold a cloud in your hand.
Right.
Sometimes they appear dark, sometimes they appear light. They can give off a shadow.
Yes.
So can a cloud.
Exactly.
Now here's the kicker. The temperature decreases.
Yes.
But electricity is a heating substance, but it gives off an EMF spike.
Exactly.
So how does that work? Well, when you look at a thunderstorm, you have a cooling substance in the sky, basically the clouds that are generating the humidity, which results in the rain. But then you have a heating substance. When people get struck by lightning, they don't freeze.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So it's literally, now you have, and then on top of that, when you have a humidity increase, apparitions appear more.
Okay, so you've made a correlation between that. Okay.
So, exactly, and it's basically like, that's when I was like, I remember the thunderstorm that I had, that we saw shadow figures walking around in our living room. And
wow.
I had several other instances of it, and I was just like, that's when thunderstorm effect.
Okay, and I laugh because you know that thing about, you know, that they say, you know, all the horror stories start, it was a dark and stormy night. It's like, well, yeah, but there is good reason why it's always a dark and stormy night when, you know, the things start happening exactly based on what you described, which was, for some reason, that makes it either, maybe they're there all along, but it just makes them easier to see or form, or, you know, whatever the process is, that they become visible. Okay. Yeah, that I absolutely agree with you as far as that there's things that facilitate it. You know, they're there all along, but that
exactly.
facilitates it. Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that, like, when we looked at other stories, because we didn't just go by our own experiences or investigations we went on, we and reviewed other teams who posted things, stories. We looked on other paranormal, like, forums, and we would read everyone's stories. When YouTube, they started posting people's stories, we started going on there. We would take stats from books. Like, we went all out, and it was basically the same pattern for the most part, which made us question some of the other ones that weren't, and it was very few that did not have a pattern. Was the story accurate? Or were they faking it? Were they just trying to get in to TV or something? Right. So, but it came to the point that the thunderstorm effect, the whole goal of it was to establish a way to try to start pinpointing where specific activity would occur before it happens and what we would expect to happen, and try to get measurements off of that. And basically, if we started noticing that our percentage increase of accuracy, that's when we would, you know, analyze that further and go a step further. Right. Or if we noticed that our stats decreased or something like that, we would take a step back and reevaluate. But that's the thing that actually we did it at a restaurant where I walked in and I told the client, I was like, don't tell me anything about your haunting. Okay. And he was good with it. He knew that we were doing an experiment. I walked around and I started pointing out where specific things would happen. And he was like, there was one point where he jumped out. He goes, I pointed to the kitchen. I was like, high level apparition manifestation. He goes, oh yeah, I see the guy that comes out. And I'm like, no.
Like, let me finish. I'm going to tell you. Right.
Yeah, but that already confirmed something to me. I'm like, whoa. Sure. And because we nailed so much of it, he contacted a university professor that he knew.
Okay.
And his name was Dr. John Foldy. Unfortunately, he passed in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
He met up with us, and I couldn't even believe it when I got a phone call. And he was like, "Hi, I'm Dr. John Foldy from State University of New York." I'm like, I'm like, he wanted to talk to me about my research. I'm like I thought I was going to pass out at that point.
Right.
Like, why is a professor calling me? And so I met him, and then I presented this stuff to him.
Okay.
And he was like, "Oh, this is plausible. I would like to work with you further on this. I've got a team based out of New York and California. We do cognitive science research." I'm like,
wow.
But I was like, I don't have any degree or PhD. He was like, that doesn't matter.
No, but you were doing the data gathering. That's great.
Well, and that's the thing. Is like, that's the part that blew my mind, because I'm so used to it being asked, well, what's your degree in and stuff like that. It's like, this is a person with a PhD, State University, who just told me that didn't matter. He basically told me, if no matter who presents it, if it can be proven,
exactly,
then it doesn't matter.
Absolutely, especially if you've got the data to back up what what you claim your theory or your hypothesis is. Of course not. No, absolutely not. I mean, I know there's probably a lot of snobs in the academic or scientific circles that are like, "Oh, he's not doesn't have any initials after no degrees." But at the end of the day, there's a lot of discoveries and things that are made from people that are not, doctors or PhDs or things like that. So he, in other words, he must have definitely seen the value of the information, the data you were gathering, John. And
yeah, and that's the thing. He because it actually kind of coincided with his with a research project he was working on.
Okay. And what was he working on? That same thing of proving life after death or existence of what was it that he was. Or was it just trying to capture proof of the supernatural, like in a broad sense?
No, his was actually more on the intuitive end.
Okay.
He focused on basically his theory, what he called is the primacy model of consciousness.
Okay.
And basically, he wanted to show that consciousness can exist in a form outside of the physical body.
Okay.
So he would go up to the point of being fully alive, intuitive and everything, astral projection, you name it, and going to just after death. For me, coming into play, and our team, we were focusing from the point of death on.
Okay.
So we were able to provide some of the information that he needed to go with his, and he had stuff that we needed to go with ours.
Right, exactly. And I imagine he was also looking at like what they call intelligent hauntings, which it's not like you're seeing like a videotape of something that doesn't engage with the living. It's when you have some type of apparition, or whether you see it or hear it, that you could see that it actually is aware of you or the people that are there, which shows some type of self-awareness.
Yeah, I mean, we did provide some information to him, but I mean, like even our team, we sway away from what's traditionally in the paranormal field, including even the terms, some of the stuff that we presented to him, because when he asked for the terminology, because he wanted to study it, and I'm just like, are you really sure you want me to give you this? Because we don't even go by this. And he was like, he wanted to see it. He looked through it, and he was just like, let's stick with science. And he just tossed it aside, like he just was like, no. I was like, I told you. Like, which I expected from him. And I brought up some of the theories that are in the field, which I was like, this goes back to that neutral frame of mind. It's just like, well, you know what? We have stuff that contradicts it, but I don't have everything to say that this isn't part, or at least part of it's not possible. You know, so the hypothesis and theories that are currently in the field, they're in the back of my head. In case some data pops up that I'm like, oh, okay, this supports this now. Now maybe I need to look at this further. But basically, when we started doing our research, we had that knowledge, but instead of focusing on that, we were like, let's start from the ground up, from the get-go, or from the beginning, and let's see if our data that we get from everything supports these theories, and then we'll continue along with them. Basically essentially verifying science within, verifying the science behind it with science.
Right.
And unfortunately, the majority of the stuff that we found hasn't led us back to the current theories and hypotheses that are out there. Really?
What did you find? Or is it too, or are you not ready to let that out? As far as, which is good, because, you know, some people, they, in other words, they have a conclusion in mind, and then they provide their findings based on what they want the conclusion to be, you know. So, but it sounds like you kept an open mind, because you're saying that where it led was not what you originally thought it was going to lead.
Exactly. I mean, like I said, we kept the thought process there, but when the data was not adding up to it, it's just like, okay, well, where did this come from? So that became another question for us. Is like, okay, well, somehow this hypothesis or theory that was developed in the field came from somewhere, or did somebody just, you know, spit it up and say, here you go? You know, which I know there are people who do that. It's just like they have an experience and they're like, well, here it is.
Right. Exactly.
And it's just like, I always keep, and I'm getting conscious of it now, is where I'm like, I keep on, and I just did it again, where I go, it's like. I think I've probably done that 100 times during this.
Don't worry about it. And I'm going to ask you, because I'm really curious. You mentioned that this professor passed away in 2014. Has he reached out to you? Have you ever had any feeling or anything that you say, you know what, he passed on, and he's either might be trying to lend a hand or saying, hey, I'm out, I'm okay, and I hope you guys do well. Have you ever had any communication or anything from him after he passed away?
We didn't actually try using any equipment to try to reach him, but we do have a few intuitive consultants on the team. Our main one, Reggie, there was one point where we were going over some, like, analyzing some stuff and throwing out theories or hypotheses and stuff. And he was just like, he looks at me and he goes, guess who has been standing here the entire time? And he was grinning, and it was just like, I'm thinking it's going to be a relative, and he just goes, Dr. John Foldy says you're on the right track.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Okay.
And I'm like, I said, if he's not here anymore, tell him I said hi in some way, because I was like, in that we really miss him. And he was pulled away. I mean, he was taken away in the worst time, because he was telling us to get a quote-unquote wish list together, and there was a piece of equipment that we were developing, or that we wanted to develop.
Okay.
He had all the connections. He was going to get a grant, and he was going to write us into that grant.
Okay.
And then when we had almost all the stuff together, we were going to approach him, and I was still finalizing, typing everything out. One day I'm driving home, and Reggie calls, and he, you know, I'm driving at the time, and he was like, John, if you're not too far away from my place, can you stop by? I don't want to talk to you while you're driving. I'm like, no problem. So I drove over, because he doesn't normally do that at all.
Right, yeah.
Reggie was literally waiting for me outside of his place, and he just hopped right into the car. He was like, there's a good reason why I did not want to talk to you while you were driving. I just want to let you know that Dr. John Foldy has passed.
You must have been shocked.
And and that's the thing, is I stopped and I stared probably for at least a minute. Like Reggie said, I was just like, I just wasn't there. And it was like, at that point, all I remember is all the talks that we had, all the ideas that we had. And I just remember it was just like glass shattering.
Okay.
Like,
right. Yeah, he was your mentor.
Yeah, and the fact that we were about to possibly get something or several things, innovative things done, that would have been a huge benefit to everyone in the field.
Right.
And now we don't have the means to do it. It was just like, what are we going to do now?
Right, and I see what you're saying.
Dr. John Foley was one in a million,
And that's a shame. And unfortunately, there was nobody else that took over what he was doing that you could have worked with?
No one that I had actually met. I met one person, but it was very quick because he was running to a meeting, but he introduced me to one professor. But I don't know any of his contacts out in California.
Oh, okay.
I know because he originally had taught at a university in California.
I see. Okay.
And it was just like, so he had connections, but the thing is that I never got to the point where I could sit down with this team because our schedules just constantly conflict.
Okay.
So he was basically the liaison.
Sure. Yeah, and that right there, you're absolutely right. That's the one link in the chain that once it was gone, it's like, okay, everything comes to a complete standstill. So what happened? That was 4 years ago. So what you've carried on the research on your end is within what you're able to do then, right?
Yeah. And my brother, he was in and out of the picture. He has just come back in.
Okay.
And I put him. I have him in charge of the science branch. And there was some new things that came about that were that came. When I showed him more because I had lost contact with him for a little while. And he knew a little bit about the thunderstorm effect theory, but then I finally showed him more, and I didn't realize how much advanced knowledge he has, how far he has come. And I'm just like, when we started talking, it's like he never knew I was had the knowledge that I had, and I didn't know he was like how he is. It was like
Wow.
It was like we were almost meeting new people.
Okay.
So we started doing. He finally got to see the thunderstorm effect in action, and it was actually during a thunderstorm. That was the best part. And we started using another method of taking photos.
Okay.
And we started capturing more apparitions.
And so let me ask you, are you going into, to test some of these theories? Is it that, let's say somebody calls you from let's say a location, says, I'm having these experiences, or I think it's haunted, and you go in there, or are you going into certain places that are, let's say, have a reputation for being haunted?
Both.
Okay.
When we do go to investigate a location, we'll still do some of the typical stuff. But what we may try some additional stuff while we're there, while we're doing the investigation. But we're still going to gather all the information, still present it, and what we end up doing after the investigation, after we close up the case and everything's hunky dory.
Right.
We don't just take the case file and put it away. We take all the statistics and start plugging away, analyzing them, and then we pull out all the cases again and start reviewing everything. What can we do better? What did we learn from this? Did we see a pattern from anything that we got here to all these other cases? And we start looking at the progress and what we can do next.
Right.
We did go to several other locations. where we just did it strictly for research purposes. You know,
Okay.
We did that recently with the Hinsdale House,
Okay.
and Wildwood Sanitarium were our last two that we just did that.
And let me ask you, the book that you wrote, the Paranormal Puzzle book, is this based on your personal experiences, or did you go into what you've done now as a research group?
It's a combination, and it's kind of a book that if people, well, first off, they have to know my sense of humor, because even my brother goes and he's just like, you know, finally when we're talking and we're really going into depth and he hears my sarcasm, now he can go to the book and go, oh, okay, that's John. That's him. That's the Paranormal Puzzle. That's the name of the approach that we use.
Okay.
So basically, I don't give the answers in the book. I may talk. I'll give a little history about myself and some of the experiences.
Okay.
I'll also talk about some of my frustrations.
Okay.
But then I start hammering on specific topics, but they're topics in all different categories. I hit numerology, apparitions, and ufology, and Nibiru, and all that type of stuff.
Okay.
But it's like, my goal is, when the person gets done with the book, can they see the hidden messages?
Let me ask you, do you think that there's a common thread or connection between all these different fields? And I mean, I know some of them are totally unrelated, but at the same time, is it because you think that there's certain times that things occur, or they're visible, or people can witness it? In other words, is there a cycle that's attached? Like, let's say ufology. Is there a cycle of when certain sightings are seen in certain places, etc.? Have you found a common theme amongst all these different topics?
There has been. One thing does lead to another. Basically, I mean, not everything hits in every category, obviously. But like, if, you know, and this will hit a very, very touchy topic.
Go ahead.
But like, for instance, when I look at ancient texts such as the Bible,
right?
I'll look at that and I'll hit, you know, I start looking through and I'm like, wait a minute. This part is demonology. This part is numerology. This part is astrology.
Okay.
And then there's some portions where I'm like, wait a minute. This description almost sounds similar to something in ufology.
All right.
And then that's where I start connecting everything. And then I'm like, you know what? Okay, there's this Bible. Well, what does this ancient text say? And then I'll go to Sumerian, and then I'll go to this, that, and the other, and I'm just like, what are the connections? What are the similarities, and what are the differences, and what was the cause of these differences?
Right, exactly. And,
I mean, so, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm saying that I know that depending, of course, everybody has their own, that they say, well, you know, that there's a lot of the ancient texts, including the Bible, among others, that sometimes when you look at them, there's a similar theme. You know, of course, they change the names, but they have a certain theme that's like, hey, that's the same theme that they had in this culture, this civilization. Yeah, of course, in that had different names, but the theme is recurring. You know, and it's almost like, I want to say, you know, like when they take these movies back from the 70s and they repackage them nowadays, and they, you know, they put out a new version of it, or it's almost sometimes you find that in some of these different ancient civilizations where it's the same theme, especially in the religious beliefs, or if they have a pantheon of gods or whatever it is. Sometimes you do find a lot of similarities, even though they're hundreds of years apart as far as when they were being practiced.
Well, and here's another interesting thing to hit on, like Nibiru. I was starting to develop a hypothesis of, not exact terminology, but it's the best way I could say it. hypothesis about quote unquote ghost planets.
Okay.
It made me question, because there are times that it's like, okay, sometimes you see this this other red planetary system nearby, and it's like,
okay,
but then other times you don't. But then there was a point that I caught on a live CCTV camera. I forgot what the location exactly was, but when I reviewed it, I noticed there was a red planetary system, and I was like, okay, this could be lens flare. And I'm like, well, there's got to be another camera in the area. I'm hoping. Sure enough, there was.
Okay.
So I compared the distance of the objects in both footage. I compared the timing. I compared anything I could possibly think of. I even saw the reflection of the object in the water.
Okay.
I'm like, okay. Now, what I noticed was that this thing keeps on appearing as red. Now, it doesn't, and it seems to have an effect. Like what I ended up doing was, and it could or could not be the effect of this, but I noticed that during this time period when this appeared, one, it appeared in the Torah codes from a professional Torah code researcher. Okay. It made it appear. He figured that he said that this thing would appear during this time frame prior to it happening. Then it appeared, and he said that it would bring destruction. Well, sure enough, volcanoes were erupting. There was huge earthquakes. There was the one in Chile, and I'm like, okay, maybe, because this planetary systems are known for having some type of effect on each other. Okay. Such as like when you have the solar flares and they shoot towards Earth, they can create other environmental issues. Sure. So who's to say that this isn't doing anything? Because it's right. From what I'm seeing, it's near the sun. What I found interesting too is that it usually appears around the sun, but it's like, okay, when I see a bunch of pictures of ghosts, a lot of them may appear, like when they use a full spectrum camera, they appear reddish. And I'm like, okay, so something's appearing reddish, and then there's this thing that's reddish. It started to raise the question, if I have an understanding of what's going on here spiritually on Earth, could some of the stuff because we can't pretend that we that we understand everything that happens on Earth. Oh, no, absolutely not. We can't. So how are we to understand what happens in the universe? Well, with the universe, what's happening out there could be some explanations of things that happen down here that we don't have an explanation for that could be explaining what's going on up there. Okay. So that's one of the thought processes, because it seems like there's a chain reaction. Right. The sun shoots a solar flare, which creates something, or creates some weather-related issues on Earth, and then the weather-related issues causes stuff on the surface, and then spiritual activity happens. It just seems like it's one thing after the other. Right, it's like a chain reaction. Exactly. And I know what you're saying. Even though you think of these things as totally unconnected, in other words, on the face of it, you're saying, you know what? When you look at all the data, there is some type of cycle or something that you see that's being affected, and this is being affected, and this all at the same time, based on either, like you said, a solar flare or whatever it is. But if you're looking at each of these areas independently, you don't realize, wow, isn't that weird that at the same time, these other things, there's either a spike, like you said, maybe in, let's say, people that are witnessing UFOs, this is an example, or there's a spike in people seeing apparitions, whatever the case might be. Huh. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. And there's, to bring that down even further, because, that was more of a wider scope type thing. Mm-hmm. And who knows, I'm not going to pretend to say that that's, or I'm not going to say that, this is definitely 100% or 100% it. I could be 100% wrong, and it's nothing. Right. But like, let's take a look at something even smaller than that. If you go to apparitions, well, there was one common thing that kept on happening with the intuitives on my team. And this is why I would not let them review like CCTV footage and audio.
Okay.
Because they would keep on saying, "Oh, look, look at the kid. You see the kid right there?" And I'm looking. I'm like, "There's nothing there." But then I'm like, they're talking about seeing. They're not sitting there meditating and gathering energy or anything like that. They're literally just walking up and going, "Oh my goodness, there's the kid. Oh yeah, the little boy." And you got another intuitive.
And you're
like,
"Yeah,
yeah. Like,
and you're like, "What little boy?" Okay.
And so at the time, I'm sitting there going, and this is why you guys do not review this stuff. But then I decided, wait a minute, what if they are capable of seeing things with, even on the monitor, that I can't see? So we did an experiment.
Okay.
We actually we went to a location, and I set up a person that did not have intuitive abilities with a person that had intuitive abilities at our command base. And when we set up the cameras, I basically walked around with one of the other intuitives and basically tried to say, if you want to talk to us, can you please go up in front of that camera right there and wave, and they will send us to you. So I was hoping that they would be compliant, and the place that we went to, they were known for being compliant.
Okay.
So we started, and one of the intuitives said, or the intuitive that was sitting at the base called over, and said, "Go over to the kitchen. There is a man standing there." Okay, so we went there.
All right.
I'm like, so we started asking questions. She comes over the walkie and she goes, "Ask him about his right hand." And I'm like, okay. So we caught an EVP that said right hand.
Oh.
Now, she said it was a male, and that his right hand was burnt.
Okay.
And then we catch a male on audio at the location where she said the person was standing, saying right hand.
Okay.
Now, that wasn't the only instance, but that was that was the first.
Right. In other words, she's seeing this on the camera. She's seeing this. In other words, she's seeing that location via a camera, like a camera was trained on it, and she's looking at a monitor.
Yep.
Okay.
So then that led me to studying about the eyes.
Yes.
What do the eyes do? What are they registering, and how do they work? Well, they're focusing on, and I wanted to know, as people get older, what happens to the eyes as well.
Right.
Well, they register the different color spectrums, and all different colors are on their own unique wavelengths.
Exactly.
Well, knowing this, I was like, okay, wait a minute. These full spectrum cameras pick up these spectrums.
Yes.
Does this mean that their eyes, that this is not some type of supernatural ability, that this is just how their body developed, that their eyes are capable of registering this? Then that made me wonder about the development of an intuitive, how they develop throughout their life.
Exactly.
Then with the kids, the studies have shown kids hear and see better than adults.
Okay.
And now, as I was getting older, I saw less and less and less and less, and heard less and less and less and less. Did the haunting go away then?
I don't think
or
it
was
did.
it just?
Oh, right.
And that's it. So this started to look at to the point that this wasn't becoming some of the stuff. I'm not saying, the third eye doesn't exist or anything of that sort.
Oh, no. I know
some
what
of
you're
the
saying.
other things. It's basically some of the stuff that is actually happening that intuitives are picking up on have nothing to do with supernatural abilities. And basically, what I noticed with them, and I would ask a bunch of questions with several intuitives. They would tell me, "Oh, well, I can hear, but I can't see them," and others I can see, but I can't hear them, and others can feel them, but they can't see or hear them. I'm like, these are the senses. These are the typical senses.
Exactly. And
so I did oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, but you know what? And you made a good point, like you said, when I was young, which is when before we get a filter, you were open to it and you saw, as a matter of fact, more probably than you wanted to see or hear. But then as we grow up, like you said, that we kind of like get that filter up, which we do. And we get it about the ages of 7 or 8. Not that we don't see, but we kind of don't accept things at face value. All right, which is, what? As a matter of fact, a lot of people say, when kids say they have imaginary playmates, how many of those playmates are really imaginary? It's just that kids, they accept it. It's like, okay, why not? So I think a lot of it, especially with the human mind, is what you accept in your mind, and your subconscious mind is like, I can see that, I can hear that. Or versus, I'm not seeing that, so I just don't see it. I think we have a lot of power on a subconscious level over what we allow ourselves to see or hear or witness based on your belief system, or maybe even fear. Especially, let's say, like somebody like yourself that had these experiences when you were young, which sounds like they were pretty traumatic, and it was a systemic, trauma series that you had because they were pretty negative, where you got at some point, besides the critical factor going up in your mind, where it's like, I don't want to hear, I don't want to see, because that ability for me was horrible. Okay, even though it sounds like you had some positive ones, overall it sounded like you went through a lot of years being scared. And that's a tough thing for a kid, as far as the adult that you become. So I think, up to a certain point, I think you're right. And I think a lot of times it's what we allow ourselves or believe that we can't see. And I know where you're going, where it's always there. It's not that somebody's special, it's that they're just somehow being able to tap into what's there.
Well, just to add to that, and that's the thing is like, not dismissing that at all about the subconscious part, because again, we're not going to fully, at least right now, understand it, and and I go against that entire belief that the whole thing of things can't be explained. It's
no.
If you're not, the only way it's not going to get explained is if, one, you have that attitude, and two, you aren't trying. If it can happen, science says there's an explanation. It physics and all that type of stuff, it can be explained. It's just, it may be beyond our understanding right now because we're missing pieces. But when it comes down to the thing I was going to bring up, Reggie, actually Reggie and the other intuitive, basically, one said that they could hear a dog whistle. Okay. I was like, okay. At the time, of course, I'm like, well, maybe let's try this. So one of the investigators, while she was in the kitchen, snuck up and blew one of the high-pitched dog whistles that are beyond the average human hearing.
Okay.
She turned around, she grabbed her ear, turned around, and just yelled at him.
Wow.
And, well, of course, the investigator turns to me, smiles, and is like, it worked.
Well, that was great. That would they proved that she proved that she was right.
Yeah. But now here's another kicker. We tried Reggie.
Okay.
Now, Reggie didn't register with a dog whistle, so what I did was I had him face away from me. I brought up a frequency test.
Okay.
On the computer, and I would just have him raise his hand when he would start hearing anything.
Okay.
And we did it for quite a while, where I kept on going from 0 hertz and just all the way up, and there was one point where I just kind of skipped around. He kept on raising his hand at 5 hertz.
Okay.
Now, that the average human hearing, which is mostly for a kid, is 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz.
Okay.
He hears 15 hertz below the average human hearing.
Okay.
Or excuse me, yeah. Okay,
right. And
yeah.
You did something similar to when they do hearing tests, to see, to check your level of, where you're hearing, especially if somebody's getting problems with, losing their hearing ability. So, but what you're saying is he had kind of like super hearing because he was able to hear sounds that most humans cannot hear.
Yeah, he was hearing low frequency, but the interesting thing was how the other one was hearing above the 20 kilohertz.
Okay.
But they're both capable of hearing entities. Reggie more so. Reggie, he gets a lot better responses than the other one does. But it was just kind of like, I'm like, okay. I figured this would be a way that we can limit down the frequency that they're on.
Right.
And I was like, oh, this does not help.
Well, no, yeah. Well, it's like one door opens, you go there and it's like, okay, well, now that we got, yeah, of course, that's exactly what happens when you're trying to, but that's really interesting that you did that you were able, that you found that they're hearing, in other words, be able to measure it at what point they were actually hearing.
Well, it got even.
Go ahead.
It got even better, a little bit better, because after we figured that out, that point, because I looked into sound even more, and I decided to ask a question: can you feel sound?
Okay.
And what is the reaction if you can feel it? Well, the answer was yes, and you can feel sound. Well, I mean, obviously, if there's like higher pitches or something like that, but in the lower frequency, you can actually feel it just before you can hear it, and you may get things like goosebumps or the hair stands up on end.
Okay.
And I'm like, wait a second. This is a typical feeling when somebody feels there's a presence in the room. What if it's not just the presence in the room? What if they're actually trying to talk to you and it's just before you can hear them? Exactly.
That's interesting. What? Yes. Yes.
So I tried that with Reggie too. I was just like, I told him, okay, when you start to feel something, let me know. And it was always just before the 5 hertz.
Huh. Wow. That is a super, super, super interesting theme you've got. That theory is, see, that in and of itself, man, let me tell you something. That right there would be so interesting to explore that further, John, because that you described is what a lot of people describe is when they, even before they actually hear or see something exactly what you described, this, either their hair stands on end or their skin prickles or something is the first thing they feel when they might think that something supernatural, paranormal is in the area. That's their first sign. Or the most common one, in other words, that most people will describe. Like, oh, I got this feeling, and my hair stood on end, or my my skin prickled, and and sometimes you get a cold spot, sometimes you don't. But that thing that you said that this is right before, and the fact that maybe what it is the effect of that entity or whatever it is trying to communicate in whatever way they can, and because then you go into the, well, how can something that supposedly doesn't have vocal cords be able to communicate? So it's like, I mean, we could extrapolate that in a different, but that is so interesting. What?
Oh, we've hit on that. That was one of the questions I hit on was these beings aren't physical. Right. How is this even possible? But we've been developing things internally about that. And here's the kicker to this. Most of the stuff that I've talked about, this was stuff from years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're actually beyond that point where we have even more that we've discovered that we have not disclosed to the public yet.
God, that sounds so interesting. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Another book? Are you gonna write, or are you gonna? I mean, that is.
We're actually starting up a web series and a Patreon page.
Okay. Okay.
And we're going to start displaying some of the stuff there.
Okay.
And basically, it's another way that we're trying to get ourselves to be able to travel around more and
Sure.
and get other people involved, because the one thing that we've said, and it's in the book too, where I say everyone has a piece to the puzzle.
Yes.
Everybody has specialties that, like, obviously I'm not going to specialize in all these other areas. I'll have great knowledge in one area, but I'm not going to sit there and pretend I know other
Absolutely.
things that other people specialize in. So that's where they come in.
Right.
So why would I dismiss other people who may have a missing piece where they could bring it in? I mean, to me, that would just be at this point, it would be selfish if I was just like, what, this is all going to be me. We're in this together.
Sure. Yeah. I think even the biggest disbelievers, how everybody says, when Houdini was, going around trying to debunk all the different mediums, I think he was the one that wanted to believe harder than anybody else. And I think that's why he was going around debunking all, saying all mediums were charlatans. I think he was the one that wanted the most to believe in an afterlife. And I think he was desperate. I think he was kind of upset that he wasn't running across. I don't think it wasn't the one that would give him the proof that he, could believe. And I think that, even though the people that, the biggest skeptics, sometimes are the ones that most want to believe that there is something that happens to us, our consciousness, our self-awareness, whatever it is, after we shed our bodies. In other words, that's the dirt nap. That's not the end of it. So, which is what you're talking about.
And we go even well beyond spiritual activity, because the way we see it, the paranormal puzzle, and my brother asked me, what is the paranormal puzzle? Because I keep on talking about it. I'm just like, it's the answer about life. Sure. The existence.
Exactly.
It's the spiritual activity. It's considered unnatural. In actuality, it's a natural phenomenon with no explanation.
Right.
Everything that happens, though unusual, has a natural explanation. We just don't have that specific explanation.
Right, to understand it. And so it stays in the realm of that. Then, of course, and that's the thing, a lot of the theories sometimes, they're very difficult to reproduce, which is a lot of times what science wants. It wants a model. It wants something that you could say, do this and this and this, and it'll reproduce. And in this field, sometimes sometimes it does, but other times it doesn't. Sometimes it could be because there's differences among individuals that are involved. It could be like what you said, sometimes weather related. It could be a cycle. It could be, there's so many variables in there that don't allow things to be reproduced to where, let's say, a lot of the scientific community will say, okay, that's a valid, that you proved it. In other words, like you said, it's there. You proved it. I think there's so many variables. And listening to you, there's more than what a lot of people think of, as to what can cause certain phenomena to manifest, or if not manifest enough so that the humans that are there, their senses can pick it up. Maybe some more than other, depending, like you said, on their abilities, or I think it also has to do with past experiences. And I'm sure you've heard the theory, John, how there's people say, well, being psychic runs in my family. I personally don't believe in that. I think we all have that capability, okay? But now, let's say you come from one of these families where you say, your grandmother, your aunt, or whoever, they were psychic, and you're told that as your kid. You start believing in that, and in other words, your filters of disbelief or that not being possible of course you're going to be more than likely to be psychic than maybe the person who's told or grows up in a household where they absolutely that's not true. And then if you add into the mix somebody like yourself that had these experiences as a child, okay, you are probably more prone or have the ability to witness any type of phenomena for whatever reason. You know, I have found in my experience that especially even as children as we're growing up, people that by nature or because of circumstances surrounding them are a little bit on the hypervigilant side tend to be able to witness psychic phenomena more often and easily as they grow. It's almost like their hypervigilance allows them to take in certain details that escape other people who are not. You see what I'm saying? They pick up on certain cues, even sometimes on a subconscious level, where they just see things. Whether they see it or they hear it or they feel something because of that hypervigilance that's part, either, like I said, part of their nature or something that's going on around them that makes them be hypervigilant. Okay, I found that a lot about among people that later on as they grow up, they're able to see or feel things, sensitives, mediums, psychics, whatever. They all have that background somewhere back there, you know. But I think we all have it. I think that if we all, in other words, we all have that ability. Just some people don't develop it, either by choice or because they just don't believe they have it, or in some cases they don't want to. Yeah, some people like they don't want to. They want the things that they can touch, feel, like, you know. They don't want to have anything to do with anything like that, much less develop any type of thing outside of their the five senses that we know of. You know, that I think, like I said, I don't think that the thing that is a genetic thing, I don't believe in that. I think we all have it. It's just what happens with it. And in your case, let me ask you now that you're an adult and you've gone in there and you say that you have sensitives or psychics. I don't know how you're using them in your team. Have you seen or heard anything yourself? This based on your experiences as a child, because obviously you can see things or hear things.
I have developed some intuitive abilities more practicing them. I mean, it's used more on a more experimental, but at the same time spiritual basis. But I don't let that overshadow
right
what I'm finding. I don't want that to be like that is the end all. This,
right.
You know, I don't need science. Because science is going to explain why I'm able to do something. Right. So, and my brother too. I mean, my brother and I recently, like, he has, I can't even explain it. There was one point where, there was a point where I didn't, I could sit there and go, maybe, like, I had that, but it was just like, you're going from, whether they believe or not to now you can hear them and all that type of stuff. So it's just kind of like I'm sitting back, and he at one point he was like, do you not believe me? Like, and I told him, and it was the truth, that I can't say yes or no because I have no evidence. I have no data to back yours up yet. So, there was one point I went over to our house, and he kept on saying that he heard our great-grandmother and great-grandpa.
Okay.
And finally, I'm standing there, and I'm talking to him, and I hear a female voice mumbling.
Okay.
And I turn, and we both look at the same place.
Okay.
And I look at him, and he's like, so you heard that? You heard a female, right? I'm like, wait a second. So these stories that he's telling me about hearing,
right,
hearing a female and potentially being our great grandmother is correct. And then he was talking to, or I would usually, criminal justice system, I always go with the allegedly. Allegedly talking to my great-grandpa down in the basement. Well, it's not really a basement, and he asked a question, and I literally heard with the naked ear.
Okay.
No abilities or anything. I just heard with the naked ear. I heard my great-grandpa respond.
Wow.
I heard one word. He heard an entire sentence.
Okay.
But the entire sentence had the word that I heard.
Right.
And he was so happy to the point that he was almost in tears, because he was like, so I'm not crazy. And it was just like, I felt bad almost, because he's very scientific, very, very. I mean, if people were to listen to my brother and I talk, I mean, we get into really deep conversations, and there was a point where he just felt, I could tell that he might have been bothered that I didn't believe him at first.
Right.
And it made him question himself. And that's the part where I kind of like feel bad about, but I made sure for him to understand that, just like him, I don't want to jump to a conclusion and say, yes, 100%, this is what it is.
Right. So what you're saying is, let's say you went to a location, and let's say you being able to hear and see things, whatever the case might be. Let's say you're there trying to conduct a scientific investigation, and you hear, well, we're going to say hear what sounds like a female voice. You don't want to jump to the conclusion that there's a female spirit there just because you're hearing it. You want to be able to document. In other words, you want to put that part of whatever you might be able away from the process of what you're doing. You want the proof, and not say, well, or for it to be subjective, because, hey, you know what? I heard what sounded like a woman's voice, so I'm going to assume that there's a spirit here and that it's a woman. You're trying to stay away from that because you're trying to do the scientific thing. Yeah, well,
that woman could actually be a kid, for all we know, depending on how light the voice is. And the other part is, well, I want to document that I heard the woman, and then when it comes back to the recording, like, okay, there was a woman that I heard. Well, here's the time that we heard it, and here's the ear that I heard it through,
right?
And this is the direction that it came from. And the recorder, which hand was it in? Was it closer? Was it farther? So I could measure, like, distance.
Right. Right.
Like, just saying that I hear it, okay, at that point it's a personal experience. We will document that we had that personal experience, because who knows whether that's going to come back, and it has before.
Sure.
But it's always great to have multiple things that come together, and it can form a bigger picture.
Right. And I know what you're saying. And at this point, you're saying, you know what? People can say they hear or see things, which doesn't mean, I know what you're saying, doesn't mean it didn't happen. You don't witness it. It's not occurring, but you want to be able to find proof that that's exactly that. There's a correlation, like you said. I heard it, but I want to see that if I had a recording going on it, they heard it as well.
Exactly. And the other thing, too, is also sometimes we'll have two people in the room, and we'll have a recorder on each side of the room, or we may have three, and it's like, okay, we want to see how it registers. Sometimes let's say the person does hear, but it doesn't catch on the recorders, doesn't mean that it wasn't actually heard. But then I have to ask the question, well, if the person, let's say two people, let's go with two people. You get myself and another person who hears the same thing, but it doesn't capture doesn't get caught on the recording. Well, why did we both hear it and the recordings didn't? What was the equation that played into this?
Right, and that's a very important thing, because you know what? Don't get me wrong. I absolutely understand where you're coming from as far as capturing evidence, but sometimes you will have that where you will have the humans witness something, whether it's seeing or hearing, and cameras or recording devices don't pick it up. and vice versa, where you capture it on film or on a recording, and the humans are like totally oblivious. And then you get the other way around. And then you ask yourself exactly what you said. Why isn't it being captured across the board? Or how is it the humans are hearing or seeing it, and the equipment, the electronic equipment, there's nothing there?
And it is actually another form of, if you think about it, it is another form of evidence. Not if we only limit it down to what the equipment gets, we're setting ourselves up for failure, because the human body could also be essentially a piece of equipment.
Sure.
I mean, like some things like even medical conditions. You don't always have something visible to indicate that there's a medical problem. You can't always see a cut or something.
Right.
That doesn't mean that nothing's there.
Yes, absolutely. Well, absolutely. I think that there's, and sometimes I think that there's a lot more progress being made as far as what our immediate five senses tell us. Okay, as far as what's actually there. Sometimes we have things, and I'm going to go back to subconscious because I'm a subconscious behaviorist, and that's why I'm going to hit up on the subconscious again. Sometimes our subconscious mind is picking up on it, our conscious mind isn't. Okay, and because we're busy, we're living life, but our subconscious mind is picking up on it. It's very subtle clues or things on the periphery of what we think we're looking at, and that feeds sometimes into experiences that we're having, as far as sometimes giving you certain feelings, or sometimes people will say, I mean, and I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to segue up to something. People sometimes have been in situations where they were in a dangerous situation, where there was danger about, and they weren't picking up on it, but their subconscious mind was. In other words, their eyes were really catching, hey, you know what, there's somebody standing in that bush in the shadows, for example. And they start getting like fearful. They want to dismiss it thinking, oh, it's my imagination. But it is what it is you actually are picking up on it on a subconscious level. Your subconscious is trying to tap you on the shoulder really hard, like, hey, you know what? You're in danger. I think there's somebody that wants to mug you that's standing over there in the shadows behind that bush. And unfortunately, some people pay attention to it and say, you know what they call that gut feeling, I need to get out of here. Or I don't understand why. And then there's the people that poo-poo it because it's just my imagination. Then something happens to them, and then they'll recount where, you know what, I had this feeling before it happened that I was in danger. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes, especially when it comes to detailing, or how can I say, recording how we're aware of certain things, the subconscious mind does have something to do with it. And then I know what you're saying about the third eye, but how much of it is actually captured by the senses we have outside of the of the psychic or the sensitive. And I know there's sometimes other things that let's say certain people with psychic abilities will pick up on, that there's just no way that they would be able to know about this. In other words, this is not your subconscious talking to you, because you're getting information that there's just possibly no way that you knew about on a subconscious level. And I think that's where a lot of your theories, I think, are so interesting, because you want to try to narrow that field down as far as to reproduce or what causes certain things to occur the way they do, and be able to capture it and say, well, you know what, not that it's not phenomena, but this is the circumstances that it sometimes occurs under. Like you said, you're finding like a commonality in some of these occurrences, which, by the way, that to me, the one that I'm really hung up on is that thing that you did with the hearing for your sensitives on your team and what they experienced. That to me is like, that's mind blowing. That's go ahead.
Well, and going along, or even away from the equipment, the one of the theories that you mentioned that we listed, the demonic frequency, we also call the spiritual frequency also.
Okay.
It actually, the research behind that was less equipment, more subconscious and maybe not necessarily intuitive, but it was a correlation of between ancient texts, some of the activity that we've experienced, some of the stories, and then testing it out ourselves. And what it led to was we were able to start figuring out when this quote unquote bad luck would occur. And pinpointing what could be the root cause of this, to the point that and we actually have one of the testimonials up on our site for this. It was a person from Texas. And I used the demonic frequency theory to basically figure out what the issue was that she was going through. She started telling me, I asked some questions. I told her, there'll probably be 1,000 questions. But as soon as she said specific things, I was like, there's the pattern. I see it right now. And then I was like, okay, so hang on. I don't want you to tell me anymore. Let me tell you what's happening to you. And I started listing off everything she was experiencing along with her child. Or a stepchild. And I was just like, I started explaining about her life. Not her entire life, but like the recent time frame. And she was like, yeah, like completely mind blown at the fact that I somehow managed to figure her out without her having to tell me almost anything. And then I said, okay, here's how you get around this, because her stepchild was going through, was experiencing like nightmares, and she was going through it, and they kept on dealing with an entity. I was like, I know what they're trying to do to you right now, and the child. Here's what you need to do. And it was something very simple. First off, I started to say, are you getting distance from more distance from your friends, family? Are you not going out more? Are you, like, I wanted to find out on the social level what was going on. And sure enough, she was becoming distant. The child was becoming distant. I was like, you guys need to get out of that house or out of the apartment, wherever you're living. Get with friends. Get out there. Stop. Get away from all this. And I started giving, further advice on it. Came back, no problem since.
In other words, you basically said they're being isolated.
That was due to some of the things that were happening, because again, it had that trend.
Right.
Like she was going into depression. The child was going into depression, and there was something that caused it, and all of a sudden, magically, this entity appears. And I'm like,
in other words,
this is a repeat of my childhood.
That is so interesting. But yeah, you had a very obvious, like, you could understand when she was describing what she was going through, was like, I understand firsthand what she's talking about, and I can see the pattern of where this is going. Wow. Yeah.
And it was the same thing as whatchamacallit, as several of the other hauntings. Like, as soon as they hit one point, it was just like, okay, you know what? Let me tell you about your haunting. To the point that it was like I could explain things away on the phone. And that's what happened with her. It was like we did a FaceTime, and within an hour I had it figured out. The other thing too is I've been doing research on, because again we're looking at going back to ancient texts. Allegedly, demonic entities and deception is going to happen, and everyone's going to be deceived, and blah 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 blah. Well, how is this possible? That's what the demonic frequency was meant to explain. And I got it all the way up to, going from just a simple person, and I started trying to figure out, well, if this does this based off of the stats I have with this, how would this affect this person theoretically? And then how would this spread? And it started looking like a virus.
Okay, now that's a good. Okay, let me ask you this. Let's say let's say that case that you discussed. I'm sure you've heard the theories of let's go with the demonic interference. We're not talking dead people here. Demonic interference, obsession, oppression, whatever you want to call it. Was it triggered by emotional, physical trauma? Were they involved in the occult? Were they doing something with Ouija boards? Were they doing the typical things that some people see as the point of origin for demonic interference, or was it something just totally different? Or what happened with them? What was the point of origin for that case that you described?
The Texas one. That one was an emotional thing that had happened. That basically something bad happened in their life.
Okay.
That emotionally impacted them, and that's when it started like.
Would you describe that as emotion? Would you describe whatever happened to them as traumatic? Emotionally traumatic? Sounds like it.
Maybe. I mean, I can't speak for them. I mean, if
right,
it were personally me, it would upset me, but it wouldn't be emotionally traumatic. Like, it wasn't anybody who like died or they watched somebody die or something like that.
And I know what you're saying. I see what you're saying, that everybody's different. What's traumatic to one person might not be so to another, or somebody might say, well, that's pretty bad, but okay. I see where you're going with that. Okay. But that was for you, what you saw as the point of origin or the catalyst for what followed after that.
Correct.
Okay.
And I've seen the other thing too that you brought up, the whole occult thing.
Okay.
I've seen that. There was even another case though where somebody literally they completely lost their faith in God.
Okay.
Completely.
Okay.
Because things were taken away from them, and they were like, I have all this faith. Why did this happen to me? So I gave up, and I was like, at that point, I was like, okay, well, I understand that this is your belief, and but I want to show you this, and I pulled out and showed them the story of Job. I remember, and I was just like, anybody who's read that knows that God and Satan, they spoke, and they were like, well, Satan made a bet. I bet he won't follow you if this happens. Well, he let it happen. So who's to say that this wasn't a test? Who's to say that God actually abandoned you? Maybe this was a test to see if you would abandon him.
It could be. It could be.
It could be. But it may not be. And that's the thing too. Is like, don't really examine. And it's like, for them, I was like, step back and really take a look at the big picture here. I know it sucks, but what are we getting out of this? What are we learning from this? Is this what this is, or is it not, or is it something truly sinister?
Exactly.
So it was just just simply an example that was thrown at them.
Right. And
but I also threw in the other equations.
Right. And I mean, I've seen this a lot. And if, let's say, in that case, I say things, sometimes people see it as something that happens to them, and they think if God didn't do it, God allowed it to be done to them. Okay. And to top it off, God didn't come in and rescue them. All right. Which happens, as a matter of fact, with a lot of kids, when bad things happen to them as children, that nobody came to rescue them. And that happens also to adults that have exactly what you described, where they have that lapse of faith. And it's almost like they want to punish God. You didn't rescue me. You allowed this to happen, so now I'm going to teach you, and I'm not going to believe in you. And, sometimes you think, okay, you know what? I think that happens to all humans, maybe some more than other, depending on certain bad things that happen to them, maybe once or more than once. But then you ask yourself, is that really what the entryway is for something demonic to step in? Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes there's other things, I think, behind it. And it's really interesting that you're going down that road because almost like, or it makes you wonder, like, sometimes that people actually stop believing in the good, or let's say in God, and start believing in the bad, okay, or be based on the bad things that have happened to them. So that is so very interesting, John. I'm going to tell you, you have a full plate there when it comes to all the things that you're exploring. It's like, what? But I think that, despite all the popularity that there are now with reality TV and, the paranormal and all this stuff, which, by the way, I'm sure that for those kids that gave you grief when you were younger because you were involved in the paranormal, haven't you going, see? See, I was right. I was just ahead of my time, because now, of course, it's become so mainstream as far as being a ghost hunter or people that are trying to get involved with the paranormal. That for all the stuff that it's, with all the gadgets, I think there's still so much mystery and so much that's unexplained when it comes to the paranormal, or how it works, or why some things happen the way they do, why some people witness it, why it happens to certain people. Or in this case, what you're finding, that there's a certain pattern when people contact you that you tell them, don't tell me anymore, I'm going to tell you. And it's like, and I'm not telling you this because I'm psychic, I'm telling you this because I'm seeing the signposts of where this is going to lead to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very interesting. That's very interesting. Because I think that thing that you described there, the isolation, like what you just said, or when people step away from contact with other human beings, whether it's family, friends, they kind of isolate or alienate themselves, maybe then go out. That's a bad sign. That's not good at all. And yeah, absolutely, I think it does make them more susceptible, especially if there's something that's evil around them, whether you believe in it or not. I don't think it, in the end, for any human being, that is good at all. But
and it's,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We went. Oh yeah, no, we went. We when we were developing that theory, we started noticing the pattern pretty early. It was actually Uini Research formed in 2000. It was like about late 2011, and it was just like kind of almost a team name change, because I originally had two other teams prior to this, and it's just kind of like, well, if we were, Uini Research is the final end all. This is the team that we're doing, but if we were going to be something or do something specific, the name, that's why we changed.
Okay.
But it was around the 2011-2012 period where I started throwing out, started picking up on some of those other patterns. And it was about 2013, 2014 where I started like publicly talking about it. And of course, naturally, nobody listened, but I was like, around this time period, and I started listing off years, given like 2016, 2017. I'm like, society is going to be falling apart, and here is going to be the root causes, and part of it is going to be spiritual activity as a result of what we are doing. We are going to self-destruct.
Okay.
And, and part of it, one of the things I did bring up was, and I know it's being brought up now, is social media.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not really social media.
No, it's not. It's not.
People are not learning how to connect, so that it came to the point that we even developed a paranormal support group.
Really?
And we even had a hashtag to go with it, which we're going to revive the hashtag. It was hashtag Cast Your Light.
Okay.
Basically casting your light into the darkness and helping people out.
Yes.
People who just feel like they're alone in all this, and it's like, you know what? You can't do this through social media. You can't give that expression through your emotional expression through text messaging. Let's all sit down in person.
Yes.
And we could talk about this freely.
Yes.
And so that's what we've been doing, and that's the other thing that we're trying to do with the Patreon and all that type of stuff, is we want to be able to travel around
Yeah.
and get people out of the house, because that's part of the problem right now. We're losing that person-to-person interaction.
Yes, and you know what? And I think I think it's fear. I think that people are very self-conscious, especially when you're meeting strangers. And I don't know if I'm sure you've heard of that thing, the meetups, that they have them in different cities or whatever. You could put a meetup together, and I mean, I've organized some, and sometimes people have a hard time, and it's like, especially it's like, okay, let's say you tell people, let's meet at a venue like a Starbucks. Okay, what's going to happen at a Starbucks? Everybody's going to sit there and we're going to talk about whatever whatever the subject is, whatever. And people are still very, very hesitant. And that's a problem because, like you said, I mean, unless you're being asked to go into a dangerous part of town or someplace that it's like, yeah, people, it's like, it's just easier. I don't know. I think they want to get away with that safer thing by staying and doing the online stuff. But that's a problem. And it's like, yeah, you know what? You're going to go out there and you're going to meet people that face to face, and some you're going to think are great. And what's the worst? You come across somebody you really don't like. Okay, get up and leave. It's like, hello?
Yeah.
That's just the way it is.
And if we've noticed, I mean, statistics-wise, like, suicide rates, all that type of stuff has increased. But you know what else has increased with it?
What?
Demonic activity.
Yes. Of course.
Before, and I said that this was going to happen, and I warned so many people, and some of the people that I warned were ex-clients. I said, listen, I see what's going on here. You want to be careful of this. And then all of a sudden I'm getting contacted by them a couple of years later going, there's something new here, and they're panicking. I come there and I find out there's a demonic entity there.
Yes.
And I'm like, I'm just like, okay, what happened? Did something happen in your life? And I start digging through it, and I'm like, there it is.
Yep.
And I tell them, I'm like, did I not tell you this?
Yes. And
they're just like, yeah, and they don't even know what to say at that point.
Right.
Yeah. So.
I totally.
It's like it's a virus.
Yes.
It spreads.
I think that, and you made a very good point, John. A lot of it has to do with isolation. Okay, when you're not amongst other human beings. I want to say, I tell everybody, what was it the other day? I was at a mall. I was like, man, I remember when I was young, the mall was the place to go. You would go there and you'd spend the whole day shopping. But the thing was, you were amongst people, It was a food court, and you would just hang out and be with your friends, or, you'd people watch, but there was that contact, okay? It was different, and of course, a lot of malls have upped and closed, and I'm thinking that's a sign of the times. Comparable to what you said as to, who wants to go to the mall? I can be online. It's like, yeah, that's not the same thing.
Well, it's so true, because, I mean, I've seen so many of my favorite stores have closed.
Yeah.
But it's, I've gotten, and that's one thing, as funny as it sounds, Nintendo still has this right, is they're focusing on bringing families in the living room, playing multiplayer together. Like that.
Right.
That's back when I was a kid, and when I had the neighborhood kids stuff, we would come over and we played 4-player Mario Kart.
Yeah. Exactly.
That was great, but now it's like, and that's one of the things we just did at our most recent paranormal support group meeting. There's a younger person who actually did join the team. They're in their teens, and she's gone through a haunting. Like, it was her mother who originally called me in.
Okay. And
we started. We were actually at the very end. We were playing Mario Karts together.
Okay.
And it was so much fun. And this may sound weird, I don't know, but like, if there are a lot of people in the room, and it's not an actual serious meeting or anything like that, and everything's just casual, everything's winding down, there are times that I actually I fall asleep, because, it's everyone's happy, everyone's relaxed,
Yeah.
and it's just like it rubs off, and I'm just like, I feel comfortable.
Yeah.
But then as soon as people leave, I wake up.
Right.
I'm like, where did everyone go?
But you know what the thing is, John, that unfortunately, there's introverts and there's extroverts as far as human beings are concerned. And unfortunately, sometimes introverts are the ones that sometimes most easily fall into this. Okay. And the thing is, you can be an introvert, and if you go out, it's like, hey, nobody's telling you wear a loud red shirt and, do jumping jacks in the middle of the room, calm down. Nobody's going to ask you to do that. But some of those, unfortunately, those personality types are the ones that sometimes more easily fall into, or they develop social anxiety. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, you know what? I hate to say it. You have to desensitize yourself. And exactly like what you said, you have to go out there and join a meetup, join a small group of people, and then realize, guess what? The spotlight is not on you. And after you go over your 10 minutes of panic, being among people that you don't know and you think you're going to judge, you realize nobody really cares. It's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. But a lot of people don't do that. And you made a very good point. Unfortunately, online, it facilitates people isolating themselves. And then if you want to once you start talking maybe some demonic influence, that makes little problems seem worse than they are, or that belief, nobody understands me, nobody's going to believe me, they're going to laugh at me, worst case scenario, where people like telescope on all these worst things and forget, I'm just going to stay home. And and then on top of that, if I'll watch a real depressing movie on TV, because that's all I'm going to do is I'm staying home, or I'm going to join a chat room where everybody's in the same boat, and it's like, that's it, it's all downhill from there. So yeah, there's a lot of subtle ways that things like that can work out, and unfortunately, like you said, some of them do end up in suicides because they feel somebody seems the worst of all, which is there is no hope. You feel hopeless, and that's a very bad place to be. And there's a lot of factors that can take you there. Absolutely, yes. Yes, I mean, online, it's a wonderful thing. It's a font of information, but human beings are social animals. Some of us are more social than others, but ultimately we are social people, social animals. I think it works to our disadvantage, the isolation that people impose on themselves. And
I agree. 100%.
Anyway, John, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you and talk to you about your theories. And let me ask you, are you going to be doing any more books? I know you said that you're going to be putting up the Patreon page and everything, but what are your plans as far as this field? Whether it's another book, what are you going to be doing with this?
Well, we do have the Paranormal Puzzle web series
Right.
that will be coming out. The Patreon is just going to be another community to help support and to get us moving, and based off of whatever we get from that will be put to all the work that we, equipment, etc. We're also working on, and currently are working on developing equipment that is not currently in the field right now.
Okay.
We're going to do experiments with those, and then we want to get it out to the public so that other paranormal teams can also utilize it. We do have our Twitter and Paranormal Puzzle Facebook page as well.
Okay.
So I mean, we do have all that stuff there, but I do have another book. On the Paranormal Puzzle Facebook page, I said that it was going to be out this year. It's not going to be because the whole Patreon thing came up, and I'm like, you know what, we got to focus on this.
Okay.
Because that's if it's successful,
okay.
and people want to see more about this and get more involved with it,
okay.
then that's going to get us further than a book.
Sure.
But the next book, which is tentatively titled Paranormal Puzzle and the Illuminated Loner.
Okay.
Focuses on the haunting that myself and Jeremy went through, but in greater detail.
Okay.
But it leaves, just like the other book, it leaves more questions than answers, but it's to get people to ask those questions and seek out those answers.
Sure.
So, and of course, we're always out there. Like I said, for anyone who saw us on the one show, there's one thing I say at the very end of the episode, or the very end of the segment, that if anybody ever needs to talk to somebody, I'm here.
What is your website address for those people that are listening to the podcast?
Sure. It is www.uiniresearch.com.
Okay. All right.
And through there, they can access our Twitter and Facebook. We have two Facebook's accounts. We have the Uini Research Facebook, and we have the Paranormal Puzzle.
Okay.
And of course, we have our email and
sure,
et cetera. But we want to also bring people back together again, and then so that's going to be one of our main goals on top of all of the research that we're doing, and eventually get it out publicly. So we're hard at work, I can tell you that much. It's like
sure sounds like it.
Full-time job.
Well, anyway, John, I look forward to seeing what you produce. I would love for you to come back and discuss it, whether it's anything that you do as far as a research, another book, whatever the case might be, because truly I find a lot of what you were talking about really fascinating. Okay, I've been involved in the paranormal field for many, many, many years. Okay, and believe me, I've heard a lot of stuff along the line, and some of them is like, huh? You know, what? But no, absolutely. I would just love to talk to you more about your theories and what you find as a consequence of your theories. So, again, thank you so very much for sharing this time with me, okay, and with my audience.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me.
No, absolutely. Take care, and good luck to you on all your projects.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
So, guys, what an absolute... I love it. Okay. What? So much interesting stuff. So much interesting stuff. See what I tell you about the paranormal, despite all the equipment and the theories and stuff that we've had, especially I want to say in the last 20 years, maybe the last 15, there's still a lot more. And I was like, and you know what? This is the thing, you know, you get a lot of paranormal researchers that go out there. Yes, they run around and they try to collect data. They try to collect, you know, whether it's the recording or the photograph or the filming or whatever, the EVPs, etc. But that's as far as they take it. They collect it, they analyze it, they say this is what it said, and sometimes maybe they try to do the research and try to verify, you know, does this belong to this person that lived here or whatever the case might be. But he's going way beyond that. He's trying to develop theories as to common themes or what. I mean, I was like, wow, these things he's talking about could be a show in and of themselves. Okay, as far as things that are, you know, are these causing effects that are there, and we're just not aware of it? I mean, everybody's always heard, let's say, like the full moon thing. For years, everybody tell you, hey, full moon, lunacy. You know, you've heard that thing about where emergency rooms are overrun during the full moon because crazy people get affected or crazier stuff happens. And some people debunk it. Other people say, I personally have a cousin of mine who was a nurse, an emergency room nurse, as a matter of fact, I want to say for 40 years. And she told me, she goes, yeah, I saw it firsthand. Okay, full moons, we had an influx not only of emergency, but crazy stuff. Okay, emergency room, but yes, that she saw a spike in what would happen as far as their traffic in the emergency room. Believe me, and she had no reason to lie to me. I absolutely take her at her word when she told me this. This was, as a matter of fact, many years ago. She already retired. But what he's trying to basically is discover something along the same lines as to other things that figure within the different phenomena of the paranormal. Okay? what he was talking about, the Nibiru effect, which is, I mean, something, it's tied into catastrophic and it's ghost planets, and like I said, that's a show in and of itself. But basically what it's saying is this presage a catastrophe, citing it, almost like you want to say, like people to say the sighting of the Mothman is like, hey, that's something that's seen prior to something catastrophic happening, maybe on a smaller scale, not planetary wise, but, and then there's people that'll say, no, it's just coincidental, or that instead of saying, in other words, that the Mothman was a warning versus causation. It didn't cause it. It wasn't something that was there to, take in the bad things. It was like a warning system. There's a lot of different theories, but along those lines. But anyway, his stuff was super interesting. And that last thing that he spoke about, which is where he's contacting people, well, no, they're contacting him, people that are having not only a haunting, but what they realize is a descent into what goes into the realms of the demonic. And he understands it very well because of first-hand experience. Okay? Like he said, that he's able to tell them, wait, don't tell me anything, I'm going to tell you. And they're surprised at how accurate he is. All right? And he's absolutely right. He is absolutely right what he said about that thing with isolation. I have run across this myself in various cases. Okay? Where people that are suffering intense hauntings. Okay? And by the way, sometimes you could say it's demonic. I mean, I have my own theory on that and the influence of the demonic versus also having a haunting involved at the same time. One of the hallmarks is people becoming isolated. Isolated. For whatever reason, they isolate themselves, and then at some point at the beginning they kind of make up excuses. Oh, I'm just going to stay home. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. Oh, it's too much trouble to get clothes on and to do this and do that. And little by little, they start shrinking their world. Okay. And before you know it, they spend all their time either watching TV, by the way, which they've admitted to me, like, usually, I wasn't kidding, really, like, either angry, sad, depressing videos or movies. And, all of a sudden, their social stuff is online stuff. And even if they have a job, they kind of even isolate themselves from the people they work with. In other words, yeah, they work with them, they're co-workers, but there's no connection with them. And I remember in one of my jobs, I was there for various years. It was like a family. We knew everybody because, we saw people, romances, people get married, people have children, divorces, separation, deaths. I mean, we experienced this. We were like secondary family at work. Yeah, there was people that you didn't get along with, but the majority, I mean, even people that you worked with that you can say, well, they were really tight buddies, but you knew about them, and when something bad happened to them, let's say you had a death in the family, people would chip in, you'd go over and you give your condolences, and hey, everything's okay. I mean, there was this thing, but sometimes when these people get into this thing of isolation, even at work, even if they have to go to work somewhere, they don't even do that. They kind of go through the mechanics of their job. And yeah, of course, they communicate if that's what's needed, but they don't form that bond. Before you know it, they just stay home all the time, and their world shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And their problems in their heads get this, and this. And then they go down that rabbit hole of thinking, especially when if they start having any type of supernatural phenomena going on. Nobody believes me. I'm the only one that's experiencing this. If I told anybody, they think I'm crazy, or they laugh at me, or, they start extrapolating worst case scenarios of every possible, and then you slide from there into hopelessness. And sometimes, because everybody goes through, everybody has stuff happen to them in their lives, some things worse than other, but if you're already there, okay, and you have something bad happen to you, and by this I don't mean bad like catastrophic. I'm saying like my car breaks down, or hey, my transmission goes out. Shit. And some people you'd be like, oh my God, it's a headache. But if you have somebody that's already there, this might be, you might think, this is catastrophic for them. They don't see it as, God, I hate this. I don't know. I'm going to have to drum up some money, or maybe, it's just becomes, if you're already in the hole, this is like if somebody took a big shovel full of dirt and put it on your head. Okay. And these things that all of a sudden, unfortunately, some people end up taking their lives because there's no hope for them. They don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And absolutely, I'm not going to say mental health has nothing to do with it, because in some cases it does. But I think a lot of times that slippery slope down is aided along by sometimes demonic forces. And again, that's a big question mark, because I also think the point of origin for a lot of these things are not just certain things. I think that even when you have something like this happen to you, whether it's a physical or emotional trauma, like I said, let's say you're an introvert, for lack of a better word. You don't have a million friends because that's just not the way you are. And that's fine. That's good. But when you do have your one or two good friends, or the people that you work with, and you have somebody to say, you know what, this happened and I don't know what I'm going to do, or whatever, that you have somebody you can talk to. Somebody's going to say, you know what, have you thought about this? Sometimes the act of being able to talk to another human being, it lifts a weight off of you. But if you've isolated yourself, and I'm sorry about my dogs, everybody decided that they needed to put in their that's my crazy dog, Jin. But anyway, guys, what I'm saying is, he's absolutely right. A lot of these things do dovetail one with the other. Okay? And it's unfortunate, but yeah, I agree with him. I love the internet. I think it's a great font of information. It facilitates a lot of things. But I also think that anything that distances human beings from contact with one another, okay, that's not a good thing. It is not a good thing. I remember when I was growing up, like I said, people, and even like not too long ago, I'm not saying people don't do it anymore, but I remember neighbors, they would open up their garage doors, and I'm not even saying on the weekends, I'm not talking like special stuff. They would open up the garage door and they would sit out there and they'd be talking, and people would go walking by and stop by and talk. I'm not saying people don't do that, but now a lot of them spend their times inside because they're binging on Netflix or whatever. And you might think, wow, but you know what? That was the thing. You knew your neighbors. You knew what was going on. Yeah, some neighbors, even if you weren't at their house, but you knew, hey, yeah, Mike, he lives down at the corner and whatever. And it was just the difference. There was, like I said, there's introverts and there's extroverts, but God, the internet has done us a big disservice in a lot of ways, because at the end of the day, I wasn't kidding. We're all social animals, for what it's worth. But anyway, guys, I hope you liked the show. I loved it. I loved speaking to John. I'm going to put a link to his website on the credits of the show. Make sure to check it out. And please like the show, subscribe so you get notification, whether it's on YouTube or any of the podcast platforms. Catch me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And like I said, I probably by the end of 2018, I'm going to be coming out with a new book about some very unusual ghost stories, because I've had a lot of requests for that. So I will let you guys know the title of it. I'm just working on it yet. Let me see. Hold on. I wanted to let Bubba go. I wanted to introduce you to my latest addition, who was making himself known. Come here, Bubba. Come here, Bubba. By the way. Oh my God. Here's Bubba. Yes, this is Bubba. This is Bubba. And Bubba is my latest addition to my pack. Okay, and Bubba was inside a rescue, one of my last rescues, that when I rescued her, we didn't realize that she had just recently become impregnated. I lost one of the puppies, but fortunately because of apparently she got together with a big dog, my little white poodle. Yes, this is my puppy Bubba, and he's with the green eyes. We tell him he gets away with murder with us because he has green eyes and he looks at us with them. But anyway, he's the one that's making all the fuss. Okay, all my other ones they're pretty cool, but yeah. And in other words, he was the one that he decided that he needed to make a lot of noise. So anyway, guys, again, thank you so very much for being part of my audience. You are all absolutely wonderful and very understanding. Take care. And by the way, I've got a lot of great shows coming up for you and a lot of fantastic and interesting guests. Take care.